Okay, thank you. All right, welcome to our fourth block presentation of the TEDx 2018 conference. Before I begin, a few reminders. Please put the cell phones on silent and away. Remember, our student presenters have spent an enormous amount of time preparing for this, and please respect their efforts. Okay, our first presenter during this block is Jocelyn Jerome. Jocelyn Jerome is a junior here at DHS. Aside from being a student, she also spends time participating in the marching band program, indoor percussion program, and the environmental club, and occasionally spends some of her Sundays playing music at the UMass student radio. Last semester, she took the class AP GOPO, or AP Government and Politics, and she learned a lot about how and why governments function the way they do. Jocelyn chose her TED topic because she has spent her time after AP GOPO trying to figure out why people are not as participatory in their government as they should be, according to her. Her goal here today is to encourage the people of Dartmouth High and the overall Dartmouth community to take greater initiative and educate themselves about our government. Please welcome Jocelyn Jerome as she presents Political PEP.
All right. So today I'm here to talk to you guys about politics. But more specifically, I'm here to talk to you guys about something called political PEP. PEP being an acronym we created that stands for three common core aspects of politics. It stands for participation, education, and polarization. These are things that aren't focused on enough by not only schools, but by society as a whole. And before we get to this, I want to refer to a few seconds ago where I walked out and told you I was simply talking politics. I did this to elicit a reaction out of all of you and to make you think. I know that when I first told people I was doing my TED Talk on politics, I got generally the same reaction from most people, a kind of wide-eyed stare thinking I had lost my mind for wanting to talk politics to a group of people. Whether or not you realize it, this is a huge problem. The fact that talking about politics in our government is something we don't want to do in a country where freedom of speech is one of our biggest virtues. Keep this in mind as we move forward. Now, back to political PEP. Now, participation is something that is getting increasingly easy to do as time progresses and technology does as well. There's more ways than most people think, actually. You can participate in marches, such as the Right to Life March, the Women's March, or the March for Science. You can also contact legislators through mail or email. You can use social media like journalism and news networks in your own community to get your voice heard and opinions heard as well. And then there is the most common way, voting. Here is a graph of our country's participation rate in relation to the rest of the world. Now, keep in mind, some of the countries higher up there, such as Belgium and Turkey, they have higher participation rates because they have mandatory voting. But there are still countries, such as Sweden, with about 83% of their citizens voting. While here in the US, we have about only 57% of our country voting. That is 2/5 of our country that is taking their way to influence their government and tossing it aside like last week's news. Now, some of you may be wondering why voting even matters. Well, it affects every part of your life. Right now, we're here in a public school with an auditorium and comfy seats that were achieved through politics. It took someone to go to our town committee and say, I want to raise money in order to get these things. And it took people voting for them to get approved. It also affects how our country collects data, which in turn affects who receives the most benefits. If you don't understand what I mean, well, here's an example to help clarify. Let's say we have this kid, Timmy, and Timmy is in the 6th grade. He is running for class president, and he's very clever. He knows that there's one simple way to get people on his side. It's simple, bribe them. So, being in 6th grade, he knows more specifically, bribe them with candy. He tells his mother this and says he wants to get lollipops to hand out to his fellow classmates. And she says there are 2 flavors. You can get lemon or grape. So he gives a survey to his fellow classmates, and finds that 70% of them prefer lemon, while 30% of them prefer grape. So, being smart, he gets them lemon. The point of this hypothetical was to show you something that most legislators know and apply in order to help them win elections. You have to appeal to the biggest group in order to win. This affects us today because here you can see voter turnout by age. Pay attention to the top purple line and the bottom blue line. The top purple line is the older citizens of our country, the ages of 60 and over, who are voting the most, while the citizens between 18 and 29 are voting the least. Now, this is important to recognize and acknowledge because it sends a message to our legislators. It tells them who they need to appeal to in order to get elected. So, we grow up our entire lives being told we're too young to make a difference. And then we reach that golden age of 18 where we can finally vote, and then we don't. Think about it. Legislators don't want to touch Social Security because they know if they touch those people who have Social Security and possibly take things away from the program, they won't get elected next year. But what if it was the other way around? What if it was so that the younger citizens voted more than the older citizens do? We could have things we want, such as better tuition systems, if we participate. So, the requirements for voting are very simple. You have to be over 18 years or older, you have to be a US citizen, live in the US, be registered to vote, and go to the correct polling place. Here, however, are a list of things you don't need to know in order to vote. You don't need to know a candidate's policies, how the policies will affect you, or even know who a candidate is. You can go to the polling place, choose the first name you see, think you've done your civic duty, and be off on your merry way. And many citizens of America do this, more than you probably think, actually. This creates a problem, and this leads to education. I looked up how many states require government and civics classes, and I was surprised to see that 50 states require it, considering the ignorance of politics in our country. Now, keep in mind, what does it really mean to be a government or civics class? Is US freshman history, is that like enough to cover the 3 branches of government? Do you really think you're informed about your government by just going over that? Dartmouth High offers 2 classes, AP Government and Politics and US Government and Politics. And these classes are great, but if not enough people sign up, they're not going to run. Now, we're at an age and day where we can't say that because we weren't taught something in school, we don't have to know it. We have technology at our fingertips practically 24/7. So we can use this to be informed. We can read newspapers, we can watch TV news, and we can use social media like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook to be informed, things that even our own politicians nowadays are using in order to keep their message spread out to the community. But there's a huge problem with this. Bias in the news is creating major issues in our country. There's MSNBC, which is liberal, Fox News, which is conservative, and CNN, which is either liberal or moderate sometimes. These are all news sources that most of you have probably heard and know about, but some of them have bias, and it also worsens this thing called selective perception. That is seeing what you want to see and hearing what you want to hear. If you want to think that liberals are bad or that conservatives are bad, and depending on what news channel you may watch, it's going to continue to just verify your feelings rather than actually inform you. So this is where polarization plays in. Polarization is when the political parties become distinctively further away from each other ideologically. Now, this is why people get nervous when I said I wanted to talk about politics. And this also creates an issue where human rights become debates instead of just simple known facts. And then when polarization increases, bipartisanship decreases. It's more difficult for the 2 parties to work together to achieve things they both want to do. And social media plays a huge role in this. It will continue if you're someone who is conservative and you only listen to conservative celebrities on your social media, or if you're liberal and you only listen to liberal celebrities on your social media, you're making it worse. You're only feeding into one side of you and not considering the other. So the effects of polarization are really hurting our country. There's hostilities between the parties. There's stark differences in what the news are reporting. This leads to alternative facts and fake facts. And then there's also the fact that nothing is getting done. This leads to our government shutting down. It is gridlock. To imagine what gridlock is, imagine a highway, Sunday, early morning, and it's a holiday. that's basically what it's going to look like right there. Some cars are moving by, the traffic is generally flowing, but nobody's at a standstill. This is what our government is like when there's less polarization going on. But nowadays, polarization is really bad. So instead of working like this, our government works like New York City traffic. It takes you 8 years to get a mile because nobody wants to work together to get anything done. So with all this being said, it begs the question, how can we stop polarization? And it's a lot simpler than most people think. You just have to listen to others. Instead of shutting them down because they don't have the same view as you, actually consider their point of view. You have to not block out content that offends you because you're just making yourself more ignorant to the other side rather than trying to find ways to combat their side or even maybe meet in the middle. You also have to educate yourself. This means that don't assume you just agree with what your party says. Actually find facts. Find news sources that are going to tell you the facts rather than fabricating stories of one political party being a hero and the other a villain. You can't just always rely on what your parents have told you your entire lives. You have to find who you are as a person and what you believe in. Now, like all great TED Talks, I'm going to end with a quote. This is a quote by Theodore Baikal. It says, "No doubt, unity is something to be desired, to be striven for, but it cannot be willed by mere declarations." I can stand up here for 8 hours talking and talking, but nothing is going to get done unless we take action. We can finally be a great generation to fix our issues and effectively work together for the greater good of our country. If you've seen other TED Talks today about incarceration and art, and you felt something like you wanted to make a difference, us talking here is the start, but we need to do something about it. Because talking may be the start, but at the end of the day, it is our actions that will truly define us and make a change. Thank you.